Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Keegan McChesney. I'm a program officer on LISC's National Rural team. Our team works with and through approximately 150 partners that are transforming rural communities in more than 2,400 counties across 49 states and Puerto Rico. Welcome to Raising the Roof. Through this webinar series, we seek to share innovations, trends, best practices, and thought leadership from our industry colleagues as we work together to create quality, affordable housing opportunities. Installing solar on residential buildings can help reduce energy costs, improve property values, and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. While other energy costs increase, the cost of using solar to produce energy becomes more affordable every year, especially as new state and federal policies, including the Inflation Reduction Act, create more incentives for solar energy production and installation. Adopting solar on affordable multifamily buildings has many benefits, but there are still many barriers. Today's webinar will provide you with foundational information needed to overcome these barriers to bring solar to your affordable housing sites. All webinar attendees are muted. However, we welcome your thoughts, reactions, and questions, so please submit them via the chat function. I'll pose as many of them to our speakers as time allows. I'm joined today by 4 guests with diverse experiences in solar. First up are 2 affordable housing solar experts from Grid Alternatives who will share their experience deploying solar in rural and tribal communities using their nonprofit development model. Shamir Chauhan is the Director of Multifamily Commercial Development, and Simon Wood is the Tribal Deputy Director for Grid Alternatives. Shamir and Simon, thanks so much for being here. The floor is yours.
Great, thanks, Keegan. Go ahead and share my screen. Let me know if you all can see that.
Yes, we can.
That's great. Well, thanks everybody, and thanks for joining us today for this webinar. And thanks a ton to the folks at LISC for inviting us to present to this group today. I'm Shamir Chauhan with Grid Alternatives. I'm based out of Oakland, California, and have been in the solar industry for 14 years now, with the last 7 years working specifically on developing solar for affordable multifamily housing sites. Also, as Keegan mentioned, with me today is Simon Wood, our Tribal Deputy Director based out of Colorado. He'll be sharing some of our important work that Grid Alternatives does in tribal communities as well. In this 30-minute segment, about 30 minutes or so, we'll be talking about the work Grid Alternatives does specifically in the multifamily space, and get a little bit into the technical aspects of what key considerations you as a building owner presumably need to make to have a successful solar project for your multifamily property. Note that a lot of the challenges I'll be discussing pertain to adding solar to existing buildings or retrofits, but a lot of the same concepts apply to new construction as well. As a quick overview, Grid Alternatives is a nonprofit organization that installs solar exclusively for low-income communities. We did our first install in 2005, and since then, we've grown to have 7 regional offices in California, as well as an office in Colorado and 1 in DC that services the Mid-Atlantic region. In that time, we've installed over 80 megawatts of solar nationwide, specifically for low-income communities with our nonprofit solar development model. We started our multifamily programming about 7 years ago. Originally, we were installing solar just for low-income homeowners, but when we hit our 10-year anniversary in 2015, we started an expansion of services that included providing services to the affordable housing sector as well. Our thinking was that in order to fulfill our mission to the fullest, we needed to ensure the benefits of clean, renewable energy are accessible to people who don't have the ability to own their own homes, but they're renters. Also, we've provided technical assistance to affordable housing organizations around the country, and our multifamily and nonprofit commercial programming alone has installed over 11 megawatts of solar nationwide. As a nonprofit, we not only install solar for low-income communities, but we also have a big focus on workforce development, and we incorporate workforce development in all aspects of our work. We have program offerings ranging from a 200-hour certification course on solar installation, and also our paid solar course program, which is an 11-month paid fellowship that trains folks on all aspects of the solar industry, recognizing there's more to solar than just construction. There's also a need for skilled professionals in other aspects of solar, including design, operations, project management, and other aspects of the solar industry. In addition to our regional offices I mentioned, we also have our tribal solar program, which offers services to tribal communities across the nation. And my colleague Simon will be talking about that as well in this presentation. So it's important to ask the question of why it makes sense to deploy solar in affordable multifamily housing, and also discuss some of the challenges. There's numerous benefits, including, well, obviously the environmental benefits. Solar is a renewable energy source that does not produce greenhouse gases. As we all are experiencing in our daily lives, global warming is real, and solar energy is one part of the solution that we can initiate to reduce global warming in our own communities right now. And another aspect that grid focuses on with the solar industry is workforce development. I wanted to note that the annual solar job census report that came out last month indicated that over 250,000 people are currently employed in the US solar industry. In the latest reported statistics that covers the years 2020 to 2021, the solar industry reported a 9% growth in jobs in the solar industry. And we're all very excited about the recently passed Inflation Reduction Act. Details are still emerging, so I'm not going to speculate too much about the act, but we definitely expect a huge growth in the solar industry in the coming years as solar becomes more affordable thanks to the provisions of the plan. And another benefit for solar above all is for most of the clients we work with, despite all the other benefits I mentioned here, the decision to go solar usually boils down to the economics. Doesn't make financial sense. Solar has become more and more affordable over the years. Anecdotally, when I started in the solar industry about 14 years ago, for reference, we were paying around $4 a watt for actual solar panels. Earlier this year, we were paying just 40 cents a watt. That's 1/10 the price in just over a decade. Additionally, as the industry has matured, we've seen drops in other components that go into the complete cost of installing solar. And at the same time, as many of you know, have probably experienced, electric utility rates have just gone up steadily in most markets. Then there's also the tenant benefits, which can be achieved either directly. For example, savings to your, could be achieved either indirectly. For example, savings to your operating budget that could be used for other services or amenities of the property. Or in some cases, you can achieve direct tenant savings by offsetting tenant electric bills. I'll get into a bit more about tenant savings in a few slides as well. I also wanted to note that according to the Department of Energy, low-income households in the US have an energy burden of 4 times that of non-low-income households, which emphasizes the importance of providing services to the sector. By energy burden, we mean the percentage of their income that goes to their utility expenses is reported to be 4 times higher than non-low-income residents. A little more detail on workforce development. As I mentioned, solar is a growing industry across the nation. Based on the recently published National Solar Job Census, there's over 250,000 people employed in the solar industry right now. We expect to see growth in that with the Inflation Reduction Act, and we look forward to meeting the challenges of providing skilled workers in the industry. As a mission-driven nonprofit, Grid Alternatives includes workforce development in our programming and acts as a feeder to solar employers to ensure there's a well-trained workforce to support the industry. We offer a variety of job trainings and programs, including our Installation Basics 200, which is a 200-hour certificate course that covers everything from getting your OSHA 10 certification, electrical theory, installation practices, actual field on the roof experience, as well as soft skills training, including some resume writing and interviewing workshops. In this slide here, we made a little impact map showing solar jobs by state. Note this includes all types of solar installations from utility scale to residential. Obviously, you'll see California as an outlier there. Also note it's population-based. California has a lot of folks and a lot of jobs in a big industry, but almost every single state has a pretty robust solar market. So I want to talk specifically about the financial benefits of solar. Looking at it first from the building owner's perspective, multifamily solar is unique for a number of reasons. One being the opportunities and also the challenges to bring savings to the property owner, and also to the tenants in some cases. But speaking to the owner perspective, solar can provide a few key financial benefits. The first one is reducing your monthly annual electric expense through electric bill savings. Note that solar systems have an expected lifetime of a minimum of 25 years. Solar panels themselves are typically warranted for 25 years, and inverter manufacturers are now offering inverter warranties up to 25 years as well. And for a frame of reference, in general in California, under our current electric rates, owners can expect payback periods in the 5 to 7 year range. With the incentive programs we have in California, notably the SOMA incentive program, we can get that down to 0 to 3 years in most cases, while also providing solar for your residents as well. Another benefit is that your electric expenses are more predictable. In most markets, electric rates have been steadily on the rise, and with changing utility policies, what your future electric expenses will be are often difficult to predict year over year, let alone 5, 10, 15, or 20 years out in the future. By producing your own power instead of buying from your utility, you reduce that variability and can more easily predict your expenses year after year. And another benefit, which is perhaps less easy to quantify, but also important, is tenant retention. If you're able to share the benefits of solar with your residents, you can reduce their monthly living expenses. I'll go over some of the challenges and solutions to sharing the benefits of solar with your low-income renters in more detail in the next slide. But as a recent example I want to give, we're finishing up the multifamily installation right now at Valle de las Brisas, the site pictured here, in California's Central Valley, a rural agricultural area with a high level of poverty. The owner acquired a distressed property and tenants are having trouble paying their rent. We're able to reduce each tenant's monthly electric expense by over $600 a year and hopes they'll be able to more easily afford their rent and other living expenses. That's actual savings in their pockets, and it's important to the building owner to make sure their tenants are more able to afford their below market rents. So in general, most of the solar that gets installed in affordable multifamily housing sites goes to offset the owner paid electric loads. This has all the benefits I mentioned in the previous slide, but it's becoming increasingly more feasible to install solar for your property and share some of the bill savings with your tenants as well. There are challenges to doing this, but there's also some innovations that are making it happen. The key challenges has been in what the industry calls the split incentive issue. The challenge is that in order for a solar project to go forward, the building owner needs to invest in the system and then make their decision based on their return on their investment. In order to get their tenants solar, there's no mechanism to have the tenants who don't have an ownership interest in the property to contribute to the cost of the system and then get a return on their investment through their bill savings. You can't expect a renter to make a capital contribution to a building that they don't own. So the only practical way to address the split incentive is to offer solar incentives. I mentioned here in California, for example, we have the SOMA incentive program. The program does a great job by addressing the challenge by offering really high incentives, basically to the point where the incentives cover the full cost of installing solar for the tenant offsetting loads, and also offers a lower incentive rate to help offset the cost for the common area loads that you as the building owner are paying. With the incentive program, we're able to get free tenant solar in a lot of cases and also generate significant savings for the owner as well. While we've come up with a great solution in California through our incentive programs, we realize other states don't have this program. Our hope is that the program will serve as an example to other states to learn from. And it'll also be interesting to see what kind of innovations come up in the next few months with the new Inflation Reduction Act. There will be an option to have the 30% federal tax credit as direct pay for nonprofits, which is new, with an additional 20% for low-income properties. This may open up a lot of possibilities to what we're able to do in California and bring it nationwide. In simple math, that could reduce, in some cases, the cost of going solar by 50% if they qualify. Again, I'm not going to get too much into the act today since it just came out and the details are still being determined, but the direct pay for nonprofits is going to be a huge financial benefit for this market that we're really interested in. Also, I wanted to note an important update from the White House last month. The White House issued guidance stating that solar credits should be excluded from utility allowance calculations. This is huge because up until now, there were challenges with some HUD-sponsored properties since their utility allowance calculations would account for the tenants' reduction in their electric expenses they would receive from solar, and their rent would go up proportionally in some cases. Therefore, it would nullify their savings, so it was a wash. So there was no incentive to get tenant offsetting solar. HUD initially issued a memo with the same guidance specifically to California in 2019. And with the news from the White House that came out last month, they've expanded that guidance to apply federally, so nationwide. And so that's a huge boom for being able to provide, takes down a big barrier to the challenges we've had with getting tenant solar. So I talked about the split incentive issue. The other, which is really a financial kind of equation. The other main issue is more nuts and bolts. How do you actually get the solar generation to your tenant meters? The solution we have in some territories is called virtual net energy metering, or VNEM for short. In regions where utilities allow this, we have a cost-effective and equitable solution to providing solar energy to residents in affordable multifamily housing. With VNEM, we basically install one large solar system for an entire building or property instead of individual systems for each unit, which would be cost prohibitive and in most cases physically and technically challenging. Then on the back end, the utility allocates bill credits from the solar generation to the tenant accounts so they can receive direct savings on their electric bills from the installed solar system. Again, note, HUD now characterizes these savings as non-monetary energy credits that don't go into the energy utility allowance calculations. This really unlocks a lot of the potential to share the benefits of solar for your residents, for your properties. And on this slide, we just have a map of the states that do have VNEM policies, which includes California, Delaware, Maryland, Massachusetts, New Hampshire, and Oregon. There may be others, but those are the ones that we're acutely aware of. I also wanted to get into the physical attributes to consider when exploring solar for your properties. There are some sites that are great for solar and some that are not. Before we spend too much time on putting together a solar project, we want to do a quick feasibility analysis using online tools. We can give a typical multifamily site a thumbs up or a thumbs down in an average of 20 or 30 minutes with a quick desktop analysis before you go too far and invest too much time and resources into your solar exploration. It's good to just vet the basic solar metrics of the site remotely. A key factor to look at a site is the available roof space. In general, installing on your roof is the most cost-efficient way to install solar. Carports are generally the most expensive since you need to procure and install the steel structure to support the solar system, which is an added cost. I'm sure some of your developers know how crazy steel pricing has been in the last few years. It's sometimes feasible to install solar on existing carport structures. It's usually on a case-by-case basis, depending on how the carport was originally built. If it passes our structural analysis, retrofitting existing carports can be an economical solution as well. And also with roofs, the big deal breaker is often the age and condition of a roof. You really want to make sure that the roof has enough useful life on it to last the duration of the system's expected lifetime. And then in general, a little bit of solar basics here, but solar panels need to be south or west facing to produce the most savings on an annual basis. For east facing roofs, it's interesting that with the increasingly lower cost of solar, the economics sometimes pencil out okay, which was different than 10 years ago, depending on a few factors, including your utility's electric rate structure and sometimes how your incentive program is designed. And finally, I could talk about solar for multifamily housing all day, but I want to make sure there's enough adequate time for everyone else and also question and answers. But I want to take a quick look on this slide about the key financial drivers that go into a solar project. In order for a solar project to pencil, there's three main factors we need to evaluate. The first one is your current electric rate and usage patterns. If your region has high electric rates, you have more potential savings to leverage. Lower electric rates are generally more challenging. With that, we make assumptions of how your rates may go up on an annual basis year after year to project out your long-term savings. We call that your escalation rate. Then there's the actual cost to install the solar system. This can be impacted by a number of factors, including the complexity of the design, the size of your system, the number of stories, the location, if it's a carport versus roof mounted, as I mentioned, and also the building's existing electrical infrastructure, if any retrofits or upgrades are needed there. The system production also matters. What that means is how much energy is your system producing from the equipment you're installing. This leads back to the earlier slide about south versus west facing roofs and shading, for example, which could reduce the amount of production that comes out of your solar system, therefore reducing your savings. And then we take into account any incentives that may be available, as well as federal sources, including the solar tax credit I mentioned. And then the final kind of secret ingredient is how the system's paid for. There's a lot of options available now to finance solar systems. That's a huge topic that's on its own. That probably merit its own webinar, but I wanted to mention that Grid Alternatives has recently launched our own financing platform where we leveraged seed funding from the Department of Energy and use philanthropic-based sources to offer below-market financing for solar projects. Our platform is designed to be flexible and offers everything from short-term loans to power purchase agreements. Given the above factors, we basically analyze the variables that I mentioned here and are able to put together an analysis showing what your annual savings are against your investment into the system to help you make the best financial decision with your energy retrofit. So I realize the last two slides were pretty technical. This is kind of a look under the hood of what solar developers look at to put together a solar project. But I think they're important factors for building owners to understand when looking into solar for their sites. I think with that, I wanted to pass it over to Simon to talk about some of our tribal work as well.
Great, thanks, Shamir. That was really interesting. Thank you. So as Shamir pointed out, Grid Alternative also has a tribal division where we basically take the goals and mission of the greater Grid Alternatives and bring them to tribal lands across the country. So I just have some quick slides that just briefly explains what we do. The tribal division was started in 2010, and we partner with indigenous nations across the U.S. to achieve their renewable energy goals. And that typically falls into grid-tied solar systems. We also do off-grid systems and commercial systems, but we'll try to stick to the direct impact of the smaller residential homes that we do and community solar projects. So we partner with local governments, tribes, schools, workforce development programs, Department of Energy, and grant opportunities to basically bring solar to indigenous peoples. Over the past few years, we've worked nationally in Montana, Alaska. We do a lot of work in South Dakota, Colorado, Utah, New Mexico, and Washington. And our team, since it was started, we've installed about 7.7 megawatts of solar, a number of off-grid systems, and we've impacted about 1,700 tribal families, which is great. Also part of our program is workforce development, as Shamir kind of explained, where when we work on projects, we include a training program as we install these sites and try to get local indigenous people to help with the installations. And in a lot of cases, we hire them. And in a lot of cases, we actually hire them and keep them on our team once the local projects are finished, which is great. So a lot of it's career placement, getting people set up with OSHA 10. We do forklift certifications. We do kind of like PV 101 training, as well as hands-on installation in the field. Let's see, can we go to the next slide? Thank you. So this to highlight a few of our projects. This is a local project we did in Colorado. It's in Boulder. It was a community solar ground-mounted system, 628 kW, and it served about 190 families and offset their energy bill. And within this project, I think it took about 4 months to build, but we had 16 trainees working on the project, and 9 of those were tribal, and a lot of the people who were helping with this project stayed on with our team. So let's see, we have Jerome here on the left. He's now kind of working as a junior SIS and project-based installer. And then we have Kai on the right, who is now one of our lead installers. So that was a really successful project, local project. We're based out of Colorado, so it was nice to do something in our backyard. Great. So then this is kind of some Nebraska and South Dakota projects that we do. Let's see, in Pine Ridge, we've done a number of homes that are owned by the local tribal housing association and housing authority. So in a lot of the communities that we serve, there's basically pre-planned communities and villages that are owned by the local tribes, and then those homes are provided to the indigenous people of the area. So in a lot of cases, we're working with housing authorities, which kind of ties into the community solar aspect. So in the Pine Ridge area for the Lakota Housing Authority, last year we finished about 55 kW on 5 residential buildings, and also the housing authority building itself. So all of that was bundled into one project that was supported by the Department of Energy. So that was great to serve that community. Another one that we did was for the Rosebud tribe, and we've done a number of different projects for them. The most recent one was a 276 kW ground mount that the purpose was to basically offset a neighborhood of 17 homes, and we're working on the integration with the utility at the moment. And then with that most recent project, we also installed 13 residential rooftop systems. On average, those were about 5 to 6 kW each, and they are all grid tied. And with both of these projects are individual projects, and we also had our training program rolled out for both of those as well. So some of our off-grid residential installs and grid tied. This is on the Navajo Nation in New Mexico. There's a community there called Ojo Encino that we've been working with over the past year or two, where we've done a number of off-grid systems, which you can see on the bottom left. It's just a pole mount with some panels, battery box, and inverter box. It's pre-fabricated on a skid, so we can go and drop them on the site and basically integrate that into their existing electrical infrastructure. The intent of that is to basically limit generator operation and generator power. These houses are primarily just run off of a 2,000 or 3,000 watt generator. So we're trying to take the generators out of service and have a renewable source of energy. Some of the other ones are grid tied, but this is a really successful project. We're doing, let's see, this fall, we're going to try to do 9 more grid tied and 6 more off-grid installations. Some of the off-grid installations are refurbishments, where we go and rewire, install new equipment on the existing infrastructure, and put basically the older systems that have been out in the desert for a long time. We put them back in service, which is great. Thank you. So currently we have our crew working in Toyoak, Colorado, which is kind of in the Four Corners area in southwestern Colorado. So the current project that we're working on now, it's 160 kW portfolio. 100 kW is on rooftops. It's throughout 24 homes. These are all grid tied. And then we have a 60 kW ground mount that we'll be installing on a supportive housing site. So I think that supportive housing site is 7 residential units. And this is very similar where we're working with the Ute Mountain Ute Housing Authority, who's the owners of these buildings, to provide solar for the residences that then rent out the buildings. So this is a really successful project so far. I think we've got about 16 of the homes installed, ready for interconnection. And we'll probably be there for 4 more weeks wrapping this up. The training program has also been really successful. We were planning on having 5 trainees, and we now have up to 13 some days. So it's been really successful. It's great. And this is kind of a case study for, opening up the training for the housing authority and provide kind of O&M support and training for their local employees so they can service and maintain the systems after they're installed. So that has been a really big push as well, so they can actually have the resources on site to monitor and maintain these sites once they're installed. So I think that highlights our most recent projects. Yeah, if anyone has any questions, I'll be happy to take questions when the time's right. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you, Shamir and Simon, so much for those really insightful presentations. Loved the high-level overview, the technical aspects, and then hearing some really great success stories from across the country. So thank you again. Now we're going to talk about the Solar Technical Assistance Retrofit Program in Massachusetts. So my colleague Emily Jones, Senior Program Officer with LISC Boston, is going to introduce the STAR program, and then Paul Lischetti, Housing Director for Hilltown Community Development, a Rural LISC partner and STAR program participant, will share lessons learned from a recent solar feasibility study. Emily, take it away.
Great. Thank you so much, Keegan. And great to hear Simon and Shamir, all the great work GRID is doing. So thank you. Again, my name is Emily Jones, and I'm with LISC in the Massachusetts office or Boston office. I lead our Green Homes Initiative here in Massachusetts, and it supports multifamily affordable housing owners in completing energy efficiency and clean energy projects, as well as driving progressive policy like the Inflation Reduction Act and some local and state policy that results in affordable, efficient, healthy, decarbonized, comfortable homes for residents. We started this initiative over a decade ago when our utility energy ratepayer funded and energy efficiency incentive program called Mass Save was creating a low income arm of their program. And since we've really focused on ensuring owners can maximize energy efficiency and clean energy technology adoption across their housing portfolios, as well as creating healthy built environments. So you can see here we run several major initiatives spanning from this building decarbonization audits to deep energy retrofit, gap funding, and then solar to knowledge sharing and policy advocacy work, as well as some new green jobs access workforce development programs we're doing. So early last year, we started partnering with the solar provider Resonant Energy and our longtime partner, Massachusetts Association of Community Development Corporations, or CDCs, on the STAR Solar program to really offer interested affordable housing owners a path to solar for their housing portfolio. As part of our energy audit program, we were finding that a lot of partners were doing what's called solar ready roofs as part of their building rehabs, but because of the cost constraints or timing issues, they weren't able to move forward with solar arrays at the time. So we saw that Resonant had been having a lot of success completing portfolio-wide solar retrofits with several CDCs in the Boston area. And so we wanted to build on that success and help owners statewide. So our participating owners receive a solar feasibility portfolio analysis similar to what Shamir and Simon were talking about. It includes designs of the preliminary solar layout for each applicable building in the portfolio. It identifies priority projects and the best locations for the solar. It strategizes around potential issues or challenges. It reviews the relevant financial pathways and incentives. So the ownership structures or the leasing options, like the power purchase agreements that were mentioned earlier. And then it outlines the next steps for near-term or longer-term solar installations. So through this program, we're working to really streamline and shorten that solar approval process. So solar is the norm rather than the exception in affordable housing. So far, we have 12 affordable housing organizations who have made the decision to move forward with solar, and that's over 2 megawatts, where our goal in this first couple of phases is 3 megawatts of solar and almost $4 million in estimated lifetime savings for the owners. So I'm going to turn it over to Paul Laschetti from Hilltown CDC now, who is one of our affordable housing partners who's participating in the STAR solar program. So that Paul can tell us more about Hilltown's experience with solar so far. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Emily. I'm going to try to share my screen. Can you see that? No?
Not yet.
All right, what do I have to do? Screen. Let me know when you see something. Oh, share. Here we go. How's that?
Perfect.
Is that perfect? Good? Okay. So Hilltown Community Development, or Hilltown CDC, is a community development corporation. We provide a variety of services, and among them is affordable housing. We have 68 units of affordable housing, and they're on properties that range from 3 units to 15 units. And we've got 10 properties in 6 different towns. So everything is really small scale. Here's a map showing the major part of our service area. And we've got the places where we have affordable housing currently are in these 6 towns over here. Each of these towns has a population of from somewhere less than 1,000 people to somewhere around 2,500 people. So where some rural areas might have a big city in the middle that a lot of their development goes into, we focus exclusively on very small towns. And to give you an idea of what some of our properties look like, this is, I guess, probably the smallest building. This is part of a 3-unit property where there's a 2-unit building on the street and this small cottage in the back. And here's a 8-unit building, actually, at 397 Main Road in Chesterfield, Mass. And this is an aerial view. Now you can see this rear area faces south, and it's a flat roof. And initially, this building has been tentatively ruled out because of the trees that surround it to the east and west. But I have asked the consultants from the STAR program to take another look, because it's 3 floors up, and it's a fairly large flat roof, and we think this building might be a good option for solar. Here's a duplex, which is part of West Hampton Senior Housing. It's 2 units. This property has a total of 15 units. And let's see, this is that same building. And these 3 buildings have been deemed to be kind of marginally feasible for solar. One of the challenges, though, is that because this is a very small project, we have not been attractive to investors, which basically means that we need to finance this ourselves. And it's not looking real good in terms of if we had like a 5% loan on this, that would eat up a lot of the solar savings. So, we're looking to the future, things like the Inflation Reduction Act, maybe that would make this a more feasible project. Another thing about this site, it does have some open spaces where we as non-solar experts here at the CDC thought maybe we could do ground mounts, but as Shamir and Simon have pointed out, then you need to pay basically for the hardware that you mount the panels on. And that again makes this project go from marginally feasible to really unfeasible. This is actually the biggest building we own. It's got 15 units of affordable housing on it, in it, and it used to be the town of Chester's high school. Now, one of the issues we've encountered in Chester is that there's a municipal electric company, which means that you would not get the same incentives as you would from one of the larger regional utility companies. But we are currently gearing up to do a $4 million+ renovation of this building that will include replacement of the roof. And if you look, you can see that's the aerial view. It's a large flat roof. So we have had some hopes to be able to incorporate solar into this development, but so far we haven't gotten there. Right now, the municipal electric company only allows solar on single-family homes. But we are told they're going to be changing that, and I strongly suspect that that has to do with some pressure from new commercial business owners. There's a lot of interest in these hill towns in marijuana growing and people negotiating with towns for permits and so on. And so I'm pretty sure they're going to be allowing solar on commercial buildings in the pretty near future. And I know that the STAR program consultant is also talking to them about that. But then we're still with the situation of we're not sure what kind of incentives we could get, or what the actual payback would look like. So to summarize, we have hit some roadblocks, limited financing options for very small projects, long payback periods, and some projects are not eligible for some of the incentives that are available in Massachusetts. The SMART program, for example, which I don't know a lot about other than to know it's available in some of our towns, but not others. The issue with rural municipal electric companies being kind of small shoestring operations may not offer the same incentives as a larger utility company. And as we've mentioned, ground mounts add costs and make a marginally feasible project unfeasible. But we are still somewhat optimistic. future possibilities. Some of our properties, that I've shown you with larger flat roofs or open lawn areas would seem to provide opportunities for solar development. And as has been mentioned, there's not only is there the Inflation Reduction Act, there's also recently passed state legislation in Massachusetts that has recently been in the news, and we're thinking, maybe there'll be better options and incentives in the near future. And also, as I mentioned, pressure from business interests may move the municipal power company to provide better options and incentives for solar development. And that wraps it up for me. And I guess I will pass it back to Keegan.
Thanks, Paul. That was great. Really appreciate hearing your perspective and Emily's perspective from Massachusetts. So I'm now going to welcome all the panelists back, and we'll have about 7 minutes here for Q&A. So if anyone has questions, please submit them via the chat box. Paul, if you could click the stop sharing at the bottom of your screen share, that would be great. Your WebEx. So Shamir, I have a question for you that I'd love to start out with. You talked about the desktop solar feasibility, right? And that can kind of give you a rough sense for whether it's thumbs up or thumbs down. Could you talk me through if a project does seem to be a go for solar from that initial analysis? What are the next steps after that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, we realize that these projects can be pretty daunting for nonprofits and not having the right resources to really dedicate time to dive into these types of investigations. So we make it a point to have a fully staffed team here that specializes in project development, and we also have some of our solar core on my team who do a lot of these remote site assessments day in and day out as kind of practice and pre-development. What we'll do is look at the site. If it gets the thumbs up, the next factor we'll do is grab your utility data. And now there's a lot of new innovations where we can grab back in the day, we'd have to ask your accounting department to go get a bunch of pieces of paper from their drawers and their bills and get us 12 months. Now we just grab that digitally, and we'll take a look at the solar production as modeled from that site assessment. We'll overlay that with your billing history. And then for an initial analysis, sometimes we'll plug in an assumed installation cost that's about what the cost would be, and see what that looks like. Get a sense of magnitude for the customer. Is this enticing for you? And if electric rates are high or your usage is high, the production's good, the cost of the build is reasonable, and maybe there's incentives. And get a sense of the customer of this looks like a good transaction, or maybe not. Let's focus on another property. And then what we need to do is actually go out and do a field investigation and confirm the site conditions. Because in this initial desktop analysis, we're looking at, as I say, sites from outer space. Good data that's out there now, but we need to get our boots on the roof to take a look at the site and the electrics and get a real cost proposal going. And once we have that, we get into contracting and explore financing options through our Energy Resilience Fund and see if we can make a pencil. We've streamlined the process quite a bit, and I think thanks to the technologies available through some of these online platforms that a lot of the solar companies use as well.
That's great. Super helpful. Thank you, Shamir. And if there are any CDC partners or maybe tribal housing authorities, TDHEs listening, are you open to them reaching out to you directly? How could they maybe get started with those initial steps?
Yeah, we'd love it. I really like supporting this market space and looking to do more work. And my contact information is up on the screen in the emails, and you can also just reach out to multifamily@gridalternatives.org, and that goes to our team to respond back to you pretty easily. And we can also sign up for our newsletter. We can stay abreast of our current events and projects we're showing off and kind of new ways to engage with our programming. So definitely reach out to Simon and myself, or just hit us at multifamily@gridalternatives.org, and you'll get a response pretty quick.
Great. All right, we have a question in the chat here. Are solar structures typically leased or purchased by the owner of the housing? Anyone can feel free to take that.
I'm happy to, if unless people are tired of hearing me talk. It really varies. The innovations in solar financing have been huge over the last decade or two. If you drive down any street and you see a solar system on a house, most chances are that's a power purchase agreement. It really is a concept where it utilizes the solar tax credit, the ITC, makes solar affordable for most customers in a lot of cases with zero upfront cost. The benefit with a power purchase agreement is that also typically it's the third party owner, the investor owns the system, or the solar company owns the system, and then you're basically buying the power from that system. But the onus to maintain that system and make sure it's up and running for the life of contract is on the owner of that system. And so there's it's kind of taken care of for you, and you get some of the savings. If you own the system, the financial savings are significantly more. Typically with a power purchase agreement, market is you'll get a 15 to 20% savings off your electric bill. With an owned system, you get all the savings. And then the factor is, how you're paying for the system outside of a power purchase agreement, whether it be a loan. We're able to offer low interest loans at 3% now, would be a short-term loan, or through your credit union or other financial institution. So it really unlocks a lot of things. It's going to be interesting to see what happens with the new direct pay tax credit through the Inflation Reduction Act. The kicker in that one is the solar tax credit is now available to nonprofits as direct pay. So you don't need a taxable entity or an investor to monetize it for you. And I think the industry is still working out the mechanics of that. But I think for the projects in Paul's case, for example, the smaller projects that are challenging, it's hard to attract a PPA or any kind of financing because the transaction costs are too high for the size of the system. Well, if you can skip that whole process and just take that tax credit yourself, that's a huge game changer. In addition to that 30%, they're now saying a little murky on it, but qualified low and moderate income owners may get an extra 20% on top of that. Not clear exactly on what that definition is, but if it could get 30% is great, 50% is amazing.
That's great. Super helpful. We have another question here. This is probably our final question. If the roof life should be 15 to 20 years, and there's a note that many low-income homes have poor roofing, and the ground mount takes out some of the feasibility or cost effectiveness, what are other options? And maybe, Simon, you could speak to how you have seen ground mount be cost effective, and then maybe also speak to what kind of roofing life is.
Yeah, thank you. Definitely the roof condition is something we verify during the site visit. Certainly something we want to get ahead of and identify, because that could be a potential issue. Absolutely. In larger projects, if the roof is still under warranty and it's a commercial project, you have to work with the roofing manufacturers and the roof installers to maintain that warranty. So roof condition is definitely a major consideration in the beginning development process. So some of the things that we've been successful with ground mounts, if there's not a roof or the structure is not adequate, the cost of ground mount installations are coming down. One strategy that we're using on smaller, like residential ground mounts, where it's either like on trailers or the structure cannot handle the additional weight loading. We've been using earth screws, which is kind of to replace a standard either driven pile or concrete pier foundation. And that has shaved a lot of costs down. And ultimately what that entails is you have a skid steer with an auger attachment, and then you have a bit that goes onto that auger attachment, and then you use the skid steer to basically screw these earth screws into the ground. we're doing one in Colorado, and I think they're 61-inch long earth screws. That eliminates a lot of costs with concrete, material, labor. So that's been a big savings. That's really helped us. And something I'd certainly recommend, with larger systems and with the ground mount, we figured it out where, the foundation engineering is always a question. And, in the perfect world, every foundation would have, a structural or civil stamp on it. We have it now set up where we'll do our own testing to meet the racking manufacturer's engineering requirements. And basically what that is you just you do a few test screws, you attach a load to it, and you see what your tension pull out strength is and how long you can hold it. So one we have to hold for like 4,500 pounds for 9 minutes. And if it moves an inch, then it's not adequate. And we have to go to the longer screw. So we're trying to figure out a process ultimately to streamline the foundation and the costs of the ground mount by taking on as much of the labor, engineering, and eliminating materials we can is to make it more cost effective. But typically, the ground mounts, shade structures, carports, they all add additional costs compared to a roof mount.
Thank you so much, Simon. Super helpful information. With that, I'm sorry to say we got to wrap it up. So Shamir, Simon, Emily, Paul, thank you all so much for sharing all of your knowledge and insights on this timely, important topic. And I also want to say thank you to all of our partners and attendees for joining this installment of Raising the Roof. Please email me. I just put my email in the chat if you have any ideas or suggestions for future topics. We'd love to hear them. So thank you all so much. Take care and enjoy the rest of your day.